Hello, dear warrior. They thought sending monsters would end you. Beasts in human skin, voices made of venom, systems designed like cages but disguised as opportunity. You were never just fighting people, you were fighting legacies of suppression. But here's the part they'll never admit. They weren't just testing your strength, they were hoping you'd disappear. Because you made them nervous, not because you were loud, but because you were unbreakable in silence. They sent critics, cowards, gatekeepers, and when that didn't work, they sent the monsters. People who'd already destroyed others, masters of manipulation, warfare artists trained in the dark. But you didn't fall. You absorbed the attack. You decoded the chaos. You studied the monster and memorized its heartbeat, and you came back, not as prey, but as the one they started copying. They tried to erase your name. Now they whisper it in rooms full of fear. You didn't just outlast the monsters. You outdesigned them. You became the blueprint, the one they follow while pretending they never tried to kill you. They were built to break others. You were forged to break limits. The monsters they sent, they were cold, precise, designed to detect weakness, exploit confusion, and shatter confidence in record time. They had one job: make sure you never rise again. And for a moment, they thought they succeeded. You stumbled. You bled. You disappeared. They celebrated in secret. But what they didn't know, you weren't falling apart. You were breaking the mold. They were built to break others. They were trained in rooms filled with screams. But you were forged in silence. No teacher, no blueprint, no applause. You weren't given a map. You became the compass. You weren't raised by power. You rose in defiance of it. So while they were sharpening weapons, you were becoming one. And by the time they looked again, you weren't someone to destroy. You were a force to copy. The people sent to stop you. They now imitate your rituals, quote your words, steal your strategy. But none of it works for them, because it wasn't the blueprint that made you powerful. It was the pain you endured writing it. You studied their monsters, then became their god. You didn't just survive the monsters. You watched them, tracked their patterns, listened to their silence, and broke apart their blueprints until you knew them better than they knew themselves. You saw how they moved, always loud when they're unsure, always smiling when they're about to betray, always calling you too intense when they felt the power leaking from your presence. While they were celebrating your pain, you were studying their psychology. They thought they were schooling you, but really, you were dissecting the professors. Every trick, every trap, every test, memorized, reverse engineered, filed away. And the moment you were ready, you didn't come back for applause. You didn't come back for revenge. You came back flawless. No cracks, no noise, just energy. And they didn't know how to handle it. Because what do monsters fear more than light? A mirror. And you held that mirror to every one of them, made them see the coward behind the cruelty, the smallness behind the show, the follower behind the facade. You studied their monsters, then you became the god they can't explain. Not because you were more brutal, but because you were unshakable. They gave you a cage. You turned it into a throne. At first, they didn't try to kill you. They tried to contain you, limit you, shrink you into something easier to ignore. They handed you a cage, all polished and polite. Called it rules, called it structure, called it normal. But what they didn't understand, you don't fear cages. You build empires inside them. You studied every corner, measured every bar, mapped the silence, learned how the trap worked and how to twist it into your weapon. They thought isolation would erase you. Instead, it made you so focused that your next move wasn't just survival, it was domination. While they were watching the door, you were digging into the foundation, breaking the system from beneath, not to escape it, but to own it. You didn't break out of the cage, you made it irrelevant. And now, they don't see a prisoner. They see a throne carved from every wall they built around you. You didn't ask for freedom. You became it. Now they quote you, but they still can't touch you. Funny, isn't it? The same people who mocked your silence now mimic your every move. They used to laugh when you disappeared. Now they analyze every second you're gone, like they're waiting for prophecy to reappear. They're using your language, repeating your rhythms, stealing your presence like it's a strategy. But here's what they can't steal: the weight of what you've been through, the scars, the nights, the truth behind the blueprint. You didn't just build a path, you bled on it. And that kind of blueprint can't be photocopied. It has to be survived. Now they say things like stay calm like him, move in silence like her, play the long game. They throw your quotes into meetings, use your tone in speeches, teach your patience like it's something they invented. But you see it. You see the cracks in their imitation, because they don't walk like you walk. They don't suffer like you suffered, and they sure as hell don't own what you earned. They want your results, but they could never handle your resistance. They quote your mind, but they'll never touch your frequency. Your pain became the blueprint. Now it's their only map. They used to call it your weakness, the way you felt too deeply, trusted too hard, got hit and still stood up. To them, pain was proof you weren't made for the top. But now, that pain became the blueprint, the exact path they're all trying to follow. They said, "Why don't you give up? You're doing too much. This won't work for someone like you." But you kept going, bleeding, crawling, studying every crack in the wall until the entire system started bleeding back. Now, they act like the steps were obvious. Stay silent. Disappear for a while. Don't react. Just become. But they forget. You didn't read that in a book. You learned it from scars. They're copying your stillness, but they weren't there for the war behind it. They're copying your voice tone, but they weren't there when no one listened. They're copying your comeback, but they never saw what it took to crawl back to life. You didn't just survive pain. You mapped it, turned it into something sacred, designed a path only the wounded could walk. And now, they follow the map you made, but without the fire that forged it. They want the destination without paying the toll. But you are the toll. You were the storm they couldn't predict. Now you're the weather they fear. You never made noise. You moved quiet, unannounced. No warning, they were waiting for thunder. You came in as fog, and by the time they realized what hit them, the damage was already irreversible. They expected you to explode, to fight loud, to self-destruct. But you didn't. You absorbed, You watched. You let them underestimate the silence until it became a weapon. See, they had playbooks for the loud ones. They had strategies for the emotional ones. But you didn't match any of their models. No pattern, no trigger, no profile, just presence, just pressure, just unreadable power, sitting in the room like a prophecy they couldn't decode. And now, they watch you the way people watch the sky before a tornado. They don't know when you'll strike, but they know it's coming, because you became the storm. Not with noise, but with certainty. You didn't shout, you didn't threaten. You just changed the air, and they've been holding their breath ever since. Now you're not a reaction, you're a forecast. The one they all fear. Because you bring destruction without ever needing to announce it. They thought you were a target, but you were a test they couldn't pass. They pointed fingers, labeled you unstable, said you were too intense, too emotional, too much. But behind closed doors, they were watching and failing. You weren't the threat, you were the exam. A living test sent into a broken system to expose who could handle truth and who would crumble under pressure. You didn't come with instructions. You came with impact. And everyone who tried to control you found themselves exposed by the very energy they thought they could dominate. They tried to handle you, manage you, box you up with words like calm down, be realistic, don't dream so big. But those words weren't for you. They were for themselves, because you triggered their limits. And anyone who fails the test, they blame the test. But you were just the mirror. Now, the same ones who called you difficult are secretly obsessed with your focus. The same ones who mocked your discipline are copying your boundaries. The same ones who doubted your path are trying to find your shortcuts. They never understood. You weren't fighting for approval. You were watching who could survive truth, and most of them couldn't. They thought you were a target. You were the trap. You didn't follow the rules. You became the rule they couldn't break. They kept handing you rule books, written by people who never lived your life, never walked through your chaos, never earned your scars. They said, this is how it's done. This is the process. This is the limit. But deep down, you knew their rules weren't law. They were fences, built to keep people like you contained. So you stopped asking, stopped waiting, stopped bending yourself into a shape that made them comfortable. You didn't follow the system. You studied it. Then you broke it from the inside. And now, they say things like, this is how they do it. That's the method they use. Let's try their strategy. Funny how that works. You were once a rebel. Now you're a reference. You didn't become part of the game. You became the glitch that exposed its fragility. They tried to correct you. Now they quote you. They tried to shame your path. Now they share it in slide decks. And the best part? You never asked for that. You weren't aiming to be followed. You were aiming to be free. And in that freedom, you became the rule they can't break, can't ignore, can't replicate. The ones who hunted you are now lost without your light. There was a time they tracked you, watched your every move, spied on your energy like it was a threat to their comfort, because it was. You weren't chaotic, you were clear. And to people addicted to confusion, clarity is terrifying. They called you unstable, but really they feared how grounded you were becoming. They said you were unpredictable, but you were just evolving faster than they could explain. So they tried to erase you, bury you, shame you into silence. But you kept moving, through nights no one saw, through pain no one clapped for, through wars that never made it to the surface. And somehow, without trying, you became the one thing they could never kill, a light they needed but could never claim. Now, they're still watching, still studying, still pretending not to notice, but their blueprint, it's yours. Their boundaries, learned from you. Their focus, trained in the same fire they once tried to drown you in. They don't admit it. They never will. But the ones who once hunted you now move like shadows, trying to follow your sunrise, lost without the very energy they feared. You didn't chase their approval. You became the standard. And now, they orbit what they once tried to destroy. Your name wasn't built for praise. It was built to echo in fear. You never needed applause. You weren't built to be clapped for. You weren't crafted in praise. You were forged in fire, hardened in silence, sharpened in rejection. Your name? It wasn't supposed to be remembered. It was supposed to be erased. They tried to keep it out of rooms, off the charts, beneath the radar, but every time they spoke in whispers, your name got louder. You became the ghost in their meetings, the vibe shift when your method got mentioned. The silence after someone asked, wait, isn't that how they used to do it? Your name. It carries weight now. Not just because of what you did, but because of what you survived. Because of how you never folded. Because of the fact that you're still here. You didn't become powerful by screaming. You became inevitable by staying. They built platforms. You built presence. They chased followers. You created frequency. And now, your name isn't a brand. It's a trigger. Spoken softly, feared deeply, respected reluctantly. Because your name doesn't beg to be remembered. It just refuses to be forgotten. They can copy your moves, but not the madness that made them. Now they study you. They analyze your posture, your routines, your strategies. They slow down your videos, zoom in on your silence. Try to find the secret they think is hidden in your methods. But here's the truth. They can't handle. Your power wasn't in the moves. It was in the madness that made them. You weren't just working hard. You were healing while building, bleeding while creating, crumbling and still choosing to rise. They don't understand that because they're not built from chaos. You are. Your success wasn't structured. It was survival. Each decision, a reaction to pain. Each strategy, a rebellion against fear. They want the rhythm without the scars, the presence without the price, the blueprint without the breakdowns. But you earned every move by walking through fire barefoot while smiling like it didn't burn. That's what they'll never replicate. Because success born from suffering tastes different. It hits harder. It lasts longer. It walks differently. They're imitating your dance, but they'll never understand your storm, because your power didn't come from perfection. It came from the madness you mastered. You didn't just survive the monsters, you made them kneel. They sent monsters to break you. People trained in manipulation, experts in fear, voices that echoed like knives in your chest. They weren't just enemies. They were engineered to dismantle everything strong in you. But they miscalculated one thing. You didn't fear the monsters. You studied them. You didn't run. You didn't freeze. You looked them in the eye and realized you've already lost. Because you're trying to scare someone who's already lived through worse. They screamed louder. You went quieter. They grew sharper. You got colder. And one by one, they started slipping. Because monsters don't know what to do with something that doesn't break. And now, the same monsters who mocked you reference your words in silence. They mimic your moves in secret. They kneel in the presence of the very force they were designed to erase. They failed, not because they weren't strong, but because you were real. You didn't survive them. You converted them. You turned monsters into messengers. Now they carry your code. Repeat your strategy. Protect the very energy they once tried to destroy. You didn't just survive the monsters. You made them bow to what they'll never understand, but will always remember. You were the end of an era, and the beginning of a new law. You didn't walk in to blend in. You walked in to end something. An era built on fear, fake smiles, and hollow crowns. They didn't expect you to make noise, but what they got was a shift, a silent quake in the system, a glitch in their hierarchy. You weren't just a new voice, you were a new law. Everything after you looked different. The rules, irrelevant. The rankings, shaken. The old kings exposed. Because you didn't just rise through the cracks, you burned the map. You forced a new one to be drawn, with your silhouette as the legend. They tried to box you. You became the box breaker. They tried to predict you. You became unreadable. Now, they whisper your tactics in boardrooms. They mimic your silence in battles. They teach your pain without even knowing it's yours. Because when systems fall and new codes rise, it's never the loud that lead. It's the unapologetic, the unbought, the unbreakable. You were never meant to be part of the old kingdom. You were sent to collapse it. And in the ashes, you became the law they now obey. You are the blueprint now, and they can't unsee it. You didn't beg to be seen. You became so undeniable, they had no choice. At first they dismissed it. It's just luck, a fluke. They'll fade soon. But you didn't fade. You flared. And now, your presence sits in the DNA of the game. Every room, you're in it. Every strategy, you influenced it. Every whisper behind your back is another classroom where they pretend they're not learning from you. But here's what breaks them completely. They can't unsee you. You're in the way people set their goals now. You're in the way silence feels heavier. You're in the pauses between their fake confidence, where fear used to be quiet, and now it sounds a lot like your name. They followed your story thinking it would crash, but instead, it became compass code. The lost ones now try to trace your pain, hoping it'll unlock the power they never earned. You didn't write books. You wrote bloodlines. You didn't drop quotes. You dropped laws. And now, they don't just follow you. They try to be you, but they never will. Because this blueprint, it wasn't drawn in ink. It was carved in war, and only warriors carry it right. So let them study. Let them stare. Let them build entire movements around your silence. You don't need their praise. You don't need their permission. because the system didn't make you. You rewrote the system. And now, you are the blueprint. And they'll never forget it.